Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Shoshana Hershkowitz, the campaign manager for the Empire State Campaign for Childcare and the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy. Shoshana, welcome back to North Country Matters. You're a regular guest here because childcare is such an important issue for so many New York families, and this year is
Yeah,
no
no, it's a
different.
pleasure.
So, what's
Pleasure to be with you as always.
Yes, you bet. So, what is different this year is that affordability is on everyone's radar screen, and there's almost nothing for New York families that is more unaffordable than childcare. So, what is making 26 a year when we might just get real progress on childcare in New York State? What has changed the conversation?
So I think certainly, although the North Country is far away from New York City, I think that the mayoral candidacy and now the mayoralty of Zohran Mamdani really uplifting childcare made a huge difference in the conversation across the state and across the country. And I want to note that Zohran Mamdani came out of the New York State legislature where these issues have been discussed. So I think that the advocacy that many of us have done for years around this issue, we heard reflected in his campaign and in his, promise to deliver universal childcare. So I think that really did drive the conversation, as well as the fact that we are, I think, at a tipping point not only in this state, but in this country with people's struggles. They're being squeezed from every angle, whether that is childcare, housing, healthcare, food. People are just being squeezed. And I think that it is this kind of confluence of many issues all at the same time, along with, I think the fact that it's an election year in New York State for both the governor and the legislature that is, prompting them to take some sort of meaningful action. So I think it is a kind of a perfect storm.
Well, if it's a perfect storm that really addresses the childcare needs in this state, I'll be happy to have that raging because we've had
Indeed.
we've seen other kinds of storms raging around this state and around this country, and something that is actually going to have a positive income would be such a nice change, wouldn't it?
Yeah, would be nice to have nice things.
Okay, so the Empire Campaign for Childcare is one of the groups in New York that has proposed a plan or a roadmap to universal childcare in the last few months, hoping to be able to capitalize on the current political will that you just described. What does that roadmap look like?
Okay, so it's a 6-year plan so that by the time you're at the end of 6 years, you are truly treating childcare as the public good rather than private burden for families that it should be. And it starts with, we're trying to do several things at once. The first thing is addressing the child care assistance program. We know that across the state in urban, suburban, and rural areas, so you've got New York City, but also 30 some odd counties outside of New York City, that have children on wait lists and families on wait lists. And that means providers don't have the stability to keep their facilities and practices, open. So we're in a place where if we don't address the funding shortfall of the child care assistance program and fully fund it, then we will not be able to get to universal child care because right now this is the system that is providing assistance to low and moderate income families across the state. And with that increase in who is eligible for child care assistance, we need that increase in funding. The governor has committed an additional $1.2 billion and seems to indicate that that is going to be a permanent thing, not a one-time thing. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And our hope is that that is enough to clear those wait lists, but we will see the devil's in the details and how that money is allocated and how quickly it gets out the door. The other piece of our plan, and this is where the governor's budget comes up short and where we urge the legislature to take up additional funding, is money for the child care workforce. Because even with a fully funded child care assistance program, if there are not places that families can bring their children to, if there's not a workforce that can care for and educate these children, then you have a subsidy that you can't use. And the reason we don't have a childcare workforce that we need to staff up to fully universal childcare is because they're not getting paid a living wage. And We are advocating for $1.2 billion in the budget on a permanent basis to scale up payment for childcare educators and for childcare work for the workforce, so that as we grow to universal childcare, we can recruit and retain a workforce that can actually meet that need and demand. We don't have that right now. Most of New York is still childcare deserts, and a great deal of that is because of the lack of compensation. The final piece of our plan is community eligibility programs. And the governor has addressed that to some degree in 3 counties, in Dutchess, Monroe, and Broome County, with these universal pilot programs for birth to 3. We're advocating for birth through 12 because we know that after the school day is done, you have plenty of parents before and after care, summer care. Childcare is not a just during the school day issue. And we want to make sure that families can access universal childcare in those settings as well. Right now, and we heard your new assembly member, Michael Cashman, talking about it in a childcare hearing, that there's no pilot program in a rural area. So, and if we're truly piloting something and trying to move and see how it works, we need to see these types of programs happening across the state in different types of communities, and that includes rural communities. So while we applaud these 3 counties, we think that it needs to be birth through 12 and also really in different types of settings.
You make a good point about Michael Cashman. He's the new assemblyman over in Franklin County, which is next door to where I am. And it's good. And my assembly member has also started talking about childcare. So those are rural voices, are really a critical part of this conversation, and they haven't been heard too much up until now. So I'm glad that they're starting to understand just how critical this piece is. You make a great point. Last year, the governor put money into facilities, but without staff, it's kind of a catch-22 that no one can solve, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. And I think that you need to invest in human infrastructure, not only physical infrastructure. And I actually think the human infrastructure is the piece that has to happen right away. It's overdue.
Well, and I know my county is one of the counties that had to stop the subsidy program because there was no money, along with so many other counties. And it throws the burden on county government, because as soon as someone has a not living wage job, they turn to the county for supplements, whether it's for
Yeah.
energy or food or health care. And that puts tremendous stress. And it's really a failure at the state level that they're throwing this onto the counties, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, this needs to be resolved at the state level. And we need to, and I think the point that you make, that these issues are all interconnected. I think often when we look at budgeting, we think, well, this issue is taken up with this committee versus that committee, but people don't live their lives in silos, and in committee hearings. All of these things are interconnected. And if you can't get childcare, you can't get to a job, which means you can't afford the things that basically keep your life running. And that does put even greater stress on just the public sector and government assistance.
Right. And of course, the whole thing does come down to an affordability issue. And I think that's really why that is such an important conversation that is being held around the state. The affordability is something that we have tried to ignore, but we no longer can. So the
Yeah.
governor has made her budget proposals. The one house budgets out of the Senate and the Assembly will follow. What do those 2 budgets need to do to build on the governor's budget to get us where we need to be? Because as you point out, the governor's budget isn't going to do it alone.
No, no, it's a great place to start from and build from. We need workforce money. That is
Mhm.
really it cannot be addressed without building on the child care workforce and recruiting and retaining it. We can't get to the universal child care idea and vision that people from all walks of life agree on. This has tremendous buy-in, but you can't get there without a workforce.
No, and in fact, staffing is in crisis. According to State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli's office, providers continue to grapple with the 2020 drop and nearly 20% availability in staff. And it's still directly tied to lack of living wage jobs. And we are asking providers to have better education so that they can do a better job. And we know what happens, that you end up going to school, you have debt, you have you don't get a good enough paying job to pay down your debt. And again, it's that vicious cycle that we always see people being trapped in, isn't it?
It is. And we are also asking early childhood educators to, contend with all sorts of crises, whether it is like learning loss, like from post-pandemic, whether it is, just families that are struggling with, being unhoused, with inadequate food, with inadequate healthcare, kids with, who have special needs that, really need to be seen and addressed early on, because that early intervention piece is so crucial. And we want to make sure that everyone can access childcare. And that means we need to give providers the support that they need to do that job. And it's a difficult and important job. So they need to be compensated, and we can't keep, squeezing them along with everybody else.
No, and that's a good point that you make about everybody being squeezed. I remember having a conversation with somebody about caregiving, and they said these days families they're in the panini generation. They're being squeezed on every side, and
Yeah.
you can only do so much with what you have. And if you
Yeah.
don't have enough income, and if you don't have enough support, something is going to give, and we're seeing it give all around the state, aren't we? So
Yeah.
the state Republicans have come up with a proposal, which would be to allow center directors to serve as classroom staff during shortages without penalty if the Office of Children and Family Services could grant temporary staff to help. But that doesn't solve the long-term problem, does it? Because again, it's taking people who are already juggling more than one hat and asking them to fill another slot in their center.
Yeah, that is it's, I understand where they're coming from, but that does not come close to addressing the problem, which is, why are there shortages? You have to address the root cause. You can't just put the Band-Aid on it. And there are shortages because this job does not pay a living wage. And until you address that inequity, this will persist.
Well, one of the things that there's talk about is, in this state is going to universal pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds. But that doesn't help the problem of childcare either, does it? Because there's nowhere near enough pre and after school care available now to begin with, as you mentioned. And if we had universal pre-K, who's going to pay for it? Because it's not cheap either, is it?
No, and certainly they have talked about expanding pre-K in the governor's budget, and that is an important piece, but it is not going to fully address childcare because, again, parents need care outside of those 6 hours of the school day. They need care on vacation, school vacations. They need care during the summer. And things like the Child Care Assistance Program have actually been, do cover that. And so pre-K is a piece of it. The other issue is that if you destabilize the sector, which, we saw in New York City with the rollout of pre-K, that a lot of family child care providers went out of business because it really, it's such a thin margin of error as far as being able to, keep your doors open, that when you lose those students and you're no longer the ones caring for them and you're only caring for the youngest ones, where you need smaller ratios, and for good reason,
Mhm.
because, caring for infants and toddlers is labor intensive. It it's We have to think about, how do you expand pre-K without harming a very delicate sector, and with also understanding that the typical family is going to need more care than, 6 hours of a school day, particularly those who are also working non-traditional hours. And more parents do not work a 9 to 5 job. So just understanding that that is not going to solve this problem in its entirety. It is a piece of the puzzle, but not the full answer.
And you make a great point about people not necessarily working 9 to 5 jobs, especially in rural New York. A lot of people are juggling 2 jobs or 3 jobs, which
Yeah.
means that they have very much schedules that don't work for a traditional childcare setting. And how are we going to meet those needs? Because until we make the jobs that they have living wage, they're still going to need more than one job. And it's it's almost like the people in Albany don't really understand how people outside of the Albany area live. I really sometimes get that feeling that those of us who live in rural New York are somehow very much forgotten in terms of the challenges and the struggles that we have. And again, it all comes down to affordability. And
And I would say it goes even beyond rural areas. I think it is a working class issue also because, in the suburbs and even and in cities, you have plenty of people that are working night hours or
Mhm.
weekend hours or, they're shift workers and childcare, you know, if you're talking about pre-K, or 3K or 2K, that 9 to 3 or whatever it is, isn't going to cover all of the hours that are needed. So we can't treat that as the blanket solution.
No, and last year there was I think it was legislation for uh non-traditional hours that didn't get passed or didn't get signed.
Didn't
And
get time.
that would have helped to address the issue that we're talking
Yep.
about. But when it doesn't make it through the system, then it's another glaring hole, isn't it?
It really is. And what we have as a system is really a patchwork.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, just what makes this even more stressful than it should be. It is expensive, it is cumbersome, and it is a patchwork. And I mean, I think that is unfortunately not exclusive to childcare. I think we can talk about the healthcare system, the elder care system. Most of our care economy is a cumbersome and expensive patchwork.
It is. And there's a consequence to business for all of this as well, because if business cannot rely on employees who can actually come to work, then they're not
Yeah.
able to meet their needs either. And so this affordability thing, it's both from the business point of view, but it's also from the employee and the family point of view. So it really is a conversation that needs to happen across a much broader spectrum than we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think businesses, we've met with business leaders and associations, and they are recognizing that they should be at the table in support of universal childcare because, you know, aside from the fact that it is good academically and socially and emotionally, it is an economic security issue. And you will not have a workforce that shows up to do the work that you have hired them to do if they don't have someone to care for their children in a stable and safe and consistent setting.
And the thing that business has to recognize is that it is more expensive to find a new hire and train them than it is to
Mhm.
keep the person that they already have. And so paying living wages is just good economic sense. So
Yeah.
what is the Empire State Campaign for Childcare advocating for this year as we go through the budget cycle in New York State and then following the post-budget cycle if we need to have additional pieces of legislation? What is it that you're looking for?
So I think our big focus is going to be building on the governor's proposal. Right now, we are
Mhm.
spending a lot of time talking to the legislature about the need to put this permanent fund in for the workforce and how that is a crucial and forgotten component in the executive budget, and that any success in universal childcare and going toward it has to include this, has to absolutely include the workforce, and has to include early childhood education in all modalities. So, meaning center-based, family, friend, and neighbor, family and group family childcare, because childcare is not a one-size-fits-all prescription,
No, that's a
and
really
different
good
families
point.
have different needs.
Yeah, that's a great point. And their needs change through time. And so
Yep.
that's another thing to think about, that, you need infant care at one point, and then you're going to need before and after school care at another point. And if someone isn't there to provide that care, it's a hole that families have a very hard time filling on their own. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and we will also be advocating to make sure that that child care assistance program is fully funded and the wait lists are cleared, and that there's a way to get that money to the, moving and able to help families and help counties and providers immediately, because this is people are just, stuck in limbo.
they are, and even in some counties who have the money, it wasn't being allotted quickly enough. There was
Yeah.
a gap, a time gap, and that doesn't help somebody when they're trying to pay their bills.
No,
They
and
need to meet
so many people
payroll.
live, yeah, so many people live paycheck to paycheck.
That's right.
So that gap can be, really truly detrimental.
And that's a lot of the reason why some businesses just fold.
Yeah.
Because daycare is a business, childcare is a business. Whether you're a
Yep.
family provider or a center provider, you still have to meet your bills. So let's keep our fingers crossed, Shoshana, that 26 is the year we make real progress on childcare in this state. What does the campaign need from citizens, from parents and providers to help get this campaign to fruition? How can we advocate and be your partner in this?
So we feel so strongly that taking action, and I'm going to put this link in the chat, you can share it later.
Mhm.
We have an action toolkit that you can use this week. Your legislators are home on recess. They are
Mhm.
in the district. This is a great time to set up a meeting in their, district office, to call their district office, to write a letter to the editor, to send an email. And we've got a toolkit there that gives you different ways that you can reach out to your legislators and make it clear that childcare is a priority for you, for your family, for your community.
You know, and this toolkit just doesn't have to be used while they're home in the next
Oh
few
no, no, no.
days.
We've
This
we've
is,
we've we've labeled it for President's Week, but yeah, and we can certainly update it as the session goes forward. But this is a great week while they're home in the district to make sure
sure.
that they hear from you.
And another thing I think that is important is that New York State has a real chance here to show leadership on this issue. We
Hmm.
saw what happened a few months ago when New Mexico did what they did towards universal child care. And that's the first time a state has really made that a priority. So states are where the country can try things out. And this is a great
Absolutely.
opportunity for New York to show leadership in this area, try something out, and show other states it can be done, because we do not lack for resources in this state. We simply
No.
need to focus on where those resources need to be best placed, right?
Absolutely. And I also think that this is the right time because so many people are going to be hurting because of HR1 and cuts in healthcare, cuts in food assistance, prices going up just, across the board. This is the time to show people that government can actually do something good for them.
That's for sure. So as we wrap up, Shoshona, give us your final thoughts here about how we can make this crisis in affordability in childcare something that we can actually solve and address. And the roadmap gives clear direction on how to do that. And really, that's one of the missing pieces. We're not asking the legislature to do it in 1 year. We're giving them
No,
the
no.
chance to do this incrementally and make it happen, right?
And truly, to do it correctly, you can't do it in 1 year. I think that we're trying to build, when you're building a house, the foundation is everything. And we're asking for a stable and sturdy and durable foundation to do this right and to do it in a way that meets the needs of specific communities, because we understand that the North Country is different than New York City. So how that plays out and serves the residents of a rural area, it's got to be done right. It's not one size fits all, and it's got to be done with care and with the voices of people who live in those communities. It can't be decided for them. It has to be decided with them, how it can work best.
That is a great point, because so often it feels like government is all top down. And
Yeah.
without much of understanding about where the down is. But when it comes up from the bottom and it meets in the middle, that's when we're going to see some real success, isn't it? And that's why these three county trials are good, but there's still a missing piece with no rural county in it. So again, we
Yep.
need to broaden our thinking and say, who actually lives in this state? Where do they live? And how can we figure out to meet their needs where they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that childcare is a statewide problem.
Mhm.
So we do have to do these programs in every part of the state because they're, it when a problem is this big, it's on government to fix it, and we need to meet people where they're at.
That's a great point. It's like paving the roads. You can't pave the
Hmm.
road out in front of your house. It's too big. It's too big a problem. So we have to come
Yeah,
together and make decisions about what good solutions look like. Shoshana, thank you
absolutely.
again for coming in. I always love our conversations because they're full of important information. There's an action piece about what people can do to help, and really paying attention to the budget this year is going to be critical as voters go forward and think about, who am I going to cast my vote for in the fall? Are these people
Yeah.
who actually listen to me? Are these people
Mhm.
who recognize what my problems are, and have they come up with good solutions? So,
Yeah,
this is a very timely conversation.
absolutely. And I think, don't be afraid to let your lawmakers hear from you because they work for you.
Absolutely. And the truth is that you can throw statistics at people all day long. That doesn't make an emotional connection. They need to hear our stories about
100%.
why we're in the situation we're in, and what our ideas are for going forward, because we need them to understand exactly what the connection is. It's not just you throw a vote in the machine in the fall and you don't hear from them again for 2 years. We They
Yeah,
need to be
yeah,
listening every day, and we need to be talking every
100%.
day.
100%.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend. I look
Always a
forward,
pleasure.
always look forward to our next conversation. It would be nice if the next one is, well, our problems are solved, but that might be a little ambitious on our part. So
Yeah,
we'll just keep
yeah,
working away at this problem, and
yeah.
you're a huge resource for us here. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. My
Uh,
pleasure.
All right, we'll be in touch. So these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember our North Country Matters, and remember that childcare is an affordability issue in New York State, something the state says is a priority. And the final budget that comes out of the governor and the legislature this spring will tell us more about how serious they are about fixing this problem. So thanks again, folks. Until the next time.